All right, Jeff. It's the all hats, all glasses edition of Culture Club half hour.
Nice to see you, Ben. How's everyone out there? Uh, it's how's everything on your side, dude? I'm upstate.
Everything in Brooklyn is great. Thank you for asking. No
Yeah.
problems. Everybody's good. 4 weeks till my son goes to college, and so we're all just counting down,
God.
checking boxes, making sure we've got fitted sheets for extra long twin beds, all that sort of stuff.
So, just out of curiosity, like, how big is this checklist? It must be pretty substantial.
It depends on how. I mean, there's a version of it that's exhaustive and, in my view, overkill, and there's a version of it that's like what you really need. And the what you really need version is not terribly long, and the exhaustive overkill one is hundreds of items, and you just don't. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think you need all that stuff.
It is that season. Kids are getting ready to go back to school. We're at I guess we're in the middle of the summer here in the northern hemisphere.
I think we're past it. Really, it's like, sorry, not the summer according to the rotation of the planet, but the summer in terms of our schedules. Like we've got 4 weeks to go, and we're at least 6 weeks in. So yeah, we're past the halfway point. Sorry, Jeff. Hate to break it to you.
It's a bummer. I thought I had a lot more time left. Anyways,
you live in Miami. It's summer all the time.
I know. Can I say one thing though? It is, it's very nice to come to New York, as I always love coming up. And there's always conversation about how to get up here. And the argument I always make, where I live in Florida, which is closer to Aventura than it is Miami. Fort Lauderdale Airport's your choice. And what's amazing is that,
of course,
you can get in and out of that area, in and out of New York, in and out of Miami, into New York in under, I'd say 2.5, max 3 hours. Most of the time it's 2.5 hours. And quite frankly, the cheapest way to do that is an airline called Spirit, which a lot of people have feelings about.
I wondered where you were going with this.
Well, I mentioned this because
now I understand.
We're talking about the premiumization of what was a true economy class. It seems like it's going away. For those that are not familiar, Spirit is a low budget airline in the United States. The fees are low, of course, because they charge you for everything else, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a juggle of how you get there.
Right.
And big news this week is that it looks like they're launching a premium component to what they do. And let's say this too: most Spirit flights already had a premium section in it. It was 4 seats at the front, which were more like captain seats. That still did not recline. But there were 4.
You have to pay extra to recline?
No, you can't even recline. So I'm curious, what is it about Spirit going premium, and are they going to add the recline?
Well, I mean, having never flown Spirit, I don't know. And it seems like reclining seats would be a thing that has to be built in with the FAA and so on and so forth. So it seems hard to believe that would be a part of the premiumization. I think that more so the story, right, of Southwest dropping its first come first serve seating policy, right. Spirit bringing premiumization in, the blowback and aftermath to Delta of the CrowdStrike hack last week, or not hack, sorry.
Oh my gosh, I could talk about that as well.
The CrowdStrike mistake is that we're seeing a change in air travel generally because post-COVID travel has come back in such a massive way,
sure.
And these businesses need to readjust to the new normal, both in terms of doing things that make business sense, and then also in terms of just managing capacity and so on. I'm interested to see after 2024 whether I will ever like spend enough money to have decent status on Delta, which has been my carrier
sure.
of choice for years. And so I'm like, well, maybe I should just switch to something else. Maybe Spirit Premium is the new way to fly.
Let's talk. Well, before we get to Spirit Premium, Southwest, of course, has been that leader. I actually have never flown Southwest, so I don't know what the experience is of picking your seats. But I do remember at some time, not 10 years ago, some guy figured out how to like change his boarding pass number, which caused some FAA issues that allowed him to get first seating. But back to Spirit, I looked further into this. There's absolutely no major change here. They are adding what seems like marketing speak to me around it. Go Big, which is one of their premium categories now, is now offering bigger seats, which includes snacks and drinks, and priority boarding, which is quite frankly what you would get almost in any airline normally. Still doesn't mention if the seats recline. And then Go Comfy is a guaranteed blocked middle seat, which I find is really interesting. And I guess this is something that Frontier Airlines, another low-cost carrier, added. The idea that you just get a middle seat now. A guarantee that you don't guarantee there's nobody sitting between you and who's there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think that may be, in my opinion, probably the most important part of it, which is called Go Comfy.
Yeah, I don't know, Jeff. I'm not switching from Delta yet.
But listen, I'm still a Delta guy myself.
We'll keep an eye on it.
But let's talk about that CrowdStrike issue, because I think that was something that affected me and plenty of other people.
All right, well, tell me about that, because it didn't affect me at all, not one iota. So I'm interested
to
hear about that. No.
Okay.
No,
some systems were affected by it. CrowdStrike is basically a security tool or a bypass tool developed by Microsoft, and just about everybody uses it. It allows them to have layers of security. More importantly, allows for scaling, which I think is important as big events happen. And as I understand it, they just put out a bad piece of code. Something that happens, quite frankly, all the time. But this hit global, and it really caused some major problems. In the airline industry and plenty of other industries. Spirit, as an example, which has and uses CrowdStrike. If you had printed your boarding pass prior to the software update, you could actually board a plane. It was crazy. You could actually board a plane, but otherwise you could not. And it grounded, quite frankly, many airlines. I think some are still dealing with it today. So it's a bad one. Now, what's cool, which I think is interesting about this story, is when this story first broke, which I think happened about 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. Eastern time. I could be wrong on that time. It was everybody was calling it a Microsoft incident. They kept calling it a Microsoft incident, a Microsoft incident. Even airlines were saying due to an incident with Microsoft's software. But by 9 or 10 a.m., their marketing team, or rather their crisis team, must have done a super good job, because they moved it over to the IP of CrowdStrike. So they made it less about a Microsoft thing. Right.
Interesting.
Their big concern, of course, was the stock market opening on Monday, and this being hailed as a Microsoft incident and the stock going down. Right.
Right.
So I found that
Microsoft did that. They did that to themselves today with their crowd, or not crowd. Funny. Their cloud division didn't scale as fast as they thought it was going to. So they're down, I think, 4% this morning. But okay, so that's kind of, strictly speaking, that's last week's news. So let's talk about this week's news, also on the plane side of things. So did you read the Blackbird spy plane from yesterday?
I have not. What did he jump on?
So Jonah wrote, so Blackbird spy plane, the let's call it menswear or fashion adjacent newsletter, highly vernacular, highly voicey, quite culty and famous at this point. But Jonah wrote a post yesterday called "Why We Do and Who We Do It For," which is, I believe, an interpolation of a 2 Chainz lyric from the Birthday song. Just a little trivia there. But which they then subtitled as "Trust on the Grifternet and the Spy Plane Position on Affiliate Links and Spawn."
Oh, wow.
So
that's a lot of vernacular.
I mean, essentially it's basically saying we make this newsletter for paying subscribers. We don't take sponsorship. We don't do affiliate links for goods that would cause you to shop more, and are tied into, cursed systems of incentivizing empty consumption. And these are the reasons why. And
you took that all the way from that simple headline?
No. I read the newsletter. You should read the newsletter. Matter of fact, I read the newsletter because you turned me on to it. So
I love it.
This is years ago.
This is I feel like Jonah is the Irving Welsh of newsletters.
That's sort of a weird.
He writes in a voice that takes you time to really pick up.
Okay. Well, maybe not quite Irving Welsh, which in my experience, requires reading out loud to sort of understand the accent and the cadence. But in any case, so they, Jonah has taken this position, which is I would call a very sort of capital J journalism, sort of stance, which is that we won't take free goods. And I know that's true because I've tried to send him things. We won't take sponsorship of the newsletter, and we won't do affiliate links that click through to, let's call it Essence or Amazon or whatever it is, right? And the thought basically being, we can't be editorially pure or truly, the recommendations that you receive as an audience member aren't untainted if we do this, if we engage in this system. I thought this would be a funny thing for us to talk about, you and I to talk about, both because you turned me on to the newsletter years ago, and because we both know Jonah and we have worked with him in commercial, capacities through Culture Club. But also because I don't agree with this stance. I think that you can be you can be truly editorial, and you can also be advantaged by commercial systems that are in place, and that those two don't have to necessarily contradict or fight each other. And I feel like Vice in my days, High Snob in yours, were some of the vanguards of proving that in a lot of respects. And I wonder to what extent that argument strikes you or falls flat.
It's a super interesting conversation. I think Jonah and his team stance is really based, I think, in what was like, if you think about New York Times and the purity that they have, or try to have, at least in not taking items. Well, hear me out, man. Hear me out.
Heavy smirk there. If those who are not watching this, I just put on a very heavy smirk.
Of course. Listen, I think trying to be pure is very difficult, but I think it's more of an aspiration. It's hard to get there. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that Jonah has not been earning against affiliate links or at least affiliate links in my mind. Now to know that his stance is because of what it leads to after, I think that's quite interesting. But I think there is a balance to it. Now, if you want to keep your newsletter pure, and he guaranteed he has a massive audience that can support that.
Yeah.
But in other cases, I think, and by the way, they're a paying audience, right? You get more than you expect with that newsletter if you are a paying member.
I mean, so I don't know what the numbers on Blackbird Spy Plane are, but generally across Substack, the paying subscribers are they're between 0 and 10% of total subscribers.
Okay.
And so you could assume that if he has 50,000 followers, which seems like it could be a reasonable guess, that he would have 5,000 payers. Those 5,000 would be paying him. They pay $5 a month for that subscription.
That's
and so
great.
He's got 20. Right. He's making $300,000 a year, less the 10% that Substack takes. So he's netting $270 before taxes. That's a living.
That's a living. And that's
100%. That's a living, and it's a living that you can afford to take that stance. With.
Yeah. Oh, I think there is another way to do it, Ben. Though you could, at least in my mind, I think he's made a very black and white decision, right? And that's fine. But
okay. But hold on a second. And this is kind of why I wanted to talk about it. The reason, and look, just to be, explicit here, I'm a huge fan. For those who are not watching this through YouTube or some podcast platform, I'm wearing a Blackbird Spy Plane hat, which I bought from the site. And I'm buying it as an illustrative point here, which is that you can make commerce a part of an editorial ecosystem naturally, organically, and without compromising, I think, the editorial point of view. And this piece from yesterday, Jonah goes into pretty great detail explaining why he and Aaron, who is his partner and his wife, believe that they can make and sell merch, and that doesn't contradict this position. And also, and this was the most interesting part, why they can take affiliate fees on eBay auctions that they point to, but that they won't do it on items from frontline retail like in Essence or something like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I guess the thought mainly being, it's like, if I'm pointing you to this particular LL Bean barn jacket, there's only one of those, right? So it's the financial incentive to me is de minimis, and so
got it.
I don't even think about it.
Like, that's interesting.
It's almost like getting in the way of the gotcha people who want to come after him for, contradicting himself, which I think is smart. But it's a very measured argument, but it's one that I think is, I like I said, I fundamentally disagree with, and also that I think it reflects a certain level of success on the platform that most people don't have.
Sure.
And
this is,
so
by
it
the way,
worries
not
me a
something
little
fresh,
bit.
right? He's been doing this for a while. Jonah.
Yeah, since the beginning.
Sorry, man.
Bless you. Oh my God, Jeff. Allergies upstate are getting you.
Yeah, I mean, interesting enough, I think I have less allergies in Miami than I do up here. But another topic, another day.
Speaking of another topic and allergies, of course, one of the most popular allergies out there is seafood. And so that brings us to our story about Red Lobster. There's a story in courts about how Red Lobster will survive bankruptcy and potentially has a long life. The headline is, analysts say the crustacean chain has legs.
That's great. Well, listen, I Red Lobster.
Yeah. So what do you think?
I grew up in Hartford, East Hartford, Connecticut. We had a Red Lobster in East Hartford, and it was something that I certainly moved away from as I got older. But I think, listen, I believe that brands should have another shot. The difficulty is, if you give this thing another shot and you become something else, it's very difficult to push, right? What can Red Lobster do to change either their menu or how they're seen? We know it's going to take time. If it does work, it will take time. Question is, are these new owners in it for the long haul, right? But even
we know for sure that limitless shrimp is off the menu because they that was the item that took them down the last time. I just think it's interesting, and we were having a conversation at Breakfast Club this morning about how there are no new candy bars, or there's no new candy, right? Like, essentially that we are all eating the same candy or variations on the same candy as we have forever. So instead of there being new candies that are being put out by Hershey's and Cadbury and whomever, they're just iterating on the existing candy bar. So instead of a regular Kit Kat, you get the green tea matcha Kit Kat or whatever.
Right.
Restaurants are a little bit the same. It's like there's so much brand equity and so much loyalty built into these names and these brands that it is much more productive to figure out how to reinvent and streamline the existing operation than it is to try to create an entirely new chain.
Plenty of examples of that. What comes to mind immediately, with me at least, is JCPenney. Not a few years ago, they sort of relaunched or repivoted under the leadership of a pretty famous guy. I forgot what his name is now. Should have had that ready. But it didn't really work. They tried to become more menswear. They tried to...
Nick Wooster was involved in that.
Nick Wooster was there for a while. They tried to
Yeah.
uplift it. I was not even upsell. I'd say uplift is a word. And it didn't go off. It didn't go off with those, moms and dads and grandmas and aunts that live in, last miles that were using JCPenney's. They wanted their JCPenney's. They wanted their pieces. The brand actually has, I think, recovered a little bit. They still could be in some serious shit.
Really? I haven't heard anybody say, you're the first person to say JCPenney to me in years.
Hey, listen, East Hartford, that's what we had.
I suppose, right? Like, look, we shopped the pennies in Syracuse all the time, Shoppingtown Mall.
While we're on this topic of reinvigorating brands, can you think of any current brands that are just not where you want it to be that you would love to see them do it again?
Nautica.
Sure.
That would be fun.
Do you put Perry Ellis up there too?
Yeah, Perry Ellis, to me, it's funny. I was just listening to Casey Lewis and Lauren Sherman talking about the Marc Jacobs collection, the grunge collection for Perry Ellis, and how that started a wave in fashion of high-end designers, ready-to-wear designers borrowing directly from the street. But Perry Ellis doesn't really exist in my conception. I don't remember it.
I think you've
Nautica.
nailed. Go ahead. Sorry, Nautica.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Nautica was that's Wu-Tang Clan, that's Grand Poobah, that's, you know, that early 90s hip hop aesthetic that was so influential for me. And so, like, yeah, that one for sure.
The Perriel's campaign, the Marc Jacobs Perriel's campaign, and by the way, I think he got fired immediately after that.
He did.
You know, we've talked about it in my classes, but go back and look at that campaign. Go look at if you look at the runway,
at the collection, you mean?
If you look at the collection on Runway, and those photos are up on Vogue, to me, it looks great on Runway. The problem is once they put it on, I think Naomi and some other models, in what would be more of and this photo is pretty famous. It's like a rural background. It just felt out of place. It didn't feel like fashion at that point. It felt like a parody.
and then you put it into pennies to go back to this thing, and then it just feels weird because it's too much like pennies to make sense in this rarefied space, and it also doesn't look enough like pennies to make sense there. So yeah.
But listen, on the Runway, I think Marc was way ahead of the game. I think it has been now seen as a pretty distinct moment, at least in the 90s.
It's probably the reason that we know his name, not to diminish his talent in any way in the meantime, but it's like that it made him famous. It allowed for the Marc Jacobs line to come out and become a thing.
And I gotta say, I love what Marc is doing these days. I love the Heaven project that he did.
I haven't talked to him in a while. I don't know.
Sorry, that came off very first person. But Mr. Jacobs, I think, is doing some cool stuff. And he's been able to keep up. He's doing his best to keep up with the kids. A lot better than I am, I think, which is interesting.
I don't know, Jeff. I mean, I think, you know, you're wearing, you know, crew socks. You're, you know, doing the Apple dance on TikTok. You're down with the kids. You're down with the kids.
I am. I try my best. Anyway, what else is up?
Speaking of that, I wanted to just say that there was a great. I mean, Taylor Lorenz, who, you know, love her or hate her or, you know, hate her, who is, you know, the internet correspondent for the Washington Post, recently relaunched her newsletter on Substack, and she wrote a piece today about the TikTok duo remixing your favorite political sound bites. And yeah, this is guys who just made or just, you know, have gone viral again recently this week because they made a sound out of some old JD Vance declaration. JD Vance basically in a 2016 interview with Charlie Rose, JD Vance declared, "I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him."
Yeah.
And now these guys, Casati Music, did a musical remix of the clip, put it up on TikTok, and now thousands of people are dancing to it.
That's great.
You know, so it's but just the ways in which this ecosystem, the way music, etc., has been activated to I don't know what, memorialize political statements, non-political statements, etc., is really fascinating. And to me, it's a kind of intellectual descendant of sampling culture in the first place, right? Which
God, it totally is.
Which then goes back to, you know, situationism and all of these art movements of the early 20th century. So I just think there's a bunch of really interesting and deep through lines in this, as well as new business models, as well as you know, just the pure sort of silliness of remixing Charlie Rose quotes into dance songs.
You know, there was a group back in the 90s called, I think they're called Emergency Broadcast, EBM, I think was the name of it. And it was they did a remix of "We Will Rock You" using video clips of George Bush. So and it was great. And they, you know, you looked at this on a huge screen, and you know, that was the first, I guess, kind of like I guess I don't want to call it mashup, but sort of cut ups or edits of conversation. I think it's great. I love it. Listen, JD Vance is a super interesting guy in that. How does he fight an uphill battle against things that he said in the past against this guy? And, you know,
well, I mean, you ignore. It's
you try to ignore, but I don't think you can.
I don't know if anybody cares. I mean, I think that's kind of where we're at in politics at the moment. Is it's and in wider culture too, to some degree. It's like, hey, I can't. That's how I felt then. not how I feel now. You can't position that against me. And even though he should be able to be held accountable for it, stating your position in the continuum of time and going like, sorry, it's not that time anymore, I can do what I want now, seems to be the stance that everybody is inured to, which I find confusing, but I guess I sort of understand it.
But on the point about video editing, listen, I couldn't be happier. I love these tools. I love the fact, and I'm not talking about making, hate videos, but kids are having fun with politics, man. Let them play. Do we thank TikTok for getting everyone dancing around this stuff? Do we get, do we thank technology? Do we thank the music industry? The kids need to release, man. Let them have fun. Let them go do something and be creative. I don't know. That was sort of the pranks that we used to pull back in the day. Maybe not at a larger scale, but prank culture, there's something to it.
Oh man. It's funny trying to explain to my kids what the Jerky Boys is a real.
Oh my God.
That's so funny because they there's no such thing as prank phone calls anymore.
No.
And so when you say, "Oh yeah, these guys were prank phone calls," they're like, "What? I don't."
Or emergency breakthrough. Remember that?
Can't understand. I don't remember emergency.
You used to be able to break through on a line.
What?
If it was like an emergency, the operator could break into a call conversation that was happening.
Okay.
And let you know, hey, there's an emergency call coming in.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's how. And
you use this to prank people?
Girls in my school used to do that shit all the time. They call.
No, I don't know. We had the dollar with the masking tape that you put into the vending machine and you pulled back out.
That's amazing. Yeah, these are things that would be lost.
I don't have emergency breakthee.
Ben, we also had
they had that paperclip thing. The payphone trick with the paperclip.
I didn't do that one.
You could unfold. Yeah, if you unwound a paperclip and you put it in the central hole in a payphone receiver, and then you typed in a series of codes, it would send the signal to the phone that the call had been paid for, and then you could make free phone calls.
Yeah, those are the best. Speaking of back in the day, I just want to loop back to a story that we had a few weeks ago regarding MTV's website going down. I think there was definitely not that much clarity around this thing. First of all, I think there was an assumption that what was on MTV was videos, and that was not. What they took down was the MTV News. The MTV's news archive, which I guess goes back to 1997. So what they're saving is essentially text, which is great too, right? They're saving what those stories were historically, which I think is super important. The same way that
this is the Wayback Machine.
That's right. Sorry, I should mention that. Archive.org took a step forward and essentially hyper archived what was already there. And they do that by doing essentially snapshots. On any given day, they'll take a snapshot of a web page. And it may not happen every day for most websites. Yeah. And then you can, of course, go back. I mean, I've gone back and found old stories of mine through Wayback Machine, et cetera, et cetera. So that's there. I think more interesting to me is how do we get those old videos back in circulation, if at all? Is there actually interest for it, right?
Right.
What does that look like?
Well, I mean, like I said a couple of weeks ago, I believe, based on some conversations that I've had, that's a rights and IP ownership transaction that's happening, and this is like a function of that, and that you will see those things come back online under a different banner. I don't mean under not an MTV News banner, but just under a sort of a new non-Viacom, rights holder banner, and then you'll see them exploited in all of the ways that you exploit IP content, meaning like rebroadcast, excerpts, relaunches, developments, all of this sort of stuff. Now, that being said, I haven't had any conversations about it since the conversation I had about it before the archive got taken down. So I don't know that to be true, but that's my assumption. Largely just because I think it makes good business sense. Like the MTV News brand produced House of Style, it produced My Block, it produced a whole series of non like breaking news type of
That's right.
programming.
Culture programming.
Culture programming, exactly. They could be very easily, recapitulated, relaunched, etc. And
House of Style, by the way. House of Style has been showing up in my Instagram stories more than ever.
Interesting.
And amazing things like Rick Owens, one of his earliest TV appearances was on House of Style when he was still living in LA, working for his wife. Also a show that you may not, you probably do remember, it was in New York and New Jersey was it called Dance Party USA? Do you remember this show? Dance Party USA?
Yeah. I had no idea that was a regional show.
It wasn't regional. We got in Connecticut, but I think it was made in New York. It was produced in New York.
I understand. Sure.
All of this it's interesting to see all of that old content come back. And, you and I we're fans of these archive accounts that kind of, remind us of the things we missed. I'm all for it, man. I'm all for it. And
well, sorry to interrupt you. Of course, because A, you want these things to be preserved. B, because they have value that can be continued and extended today. And C, because it makes us feel less lost adrift in the sea of culture.
At the end of the day, like we need to keep educating the younger creators of what came before. Right.
That's right.
That to me is class. That's the top of the class. But Ben, another half hour, bud.
How about it? Well, we will continue the conversation again next week. So come back and join us then, guys. And if you haven't subscribed or bookmarked this conversation, please do, because we'll be back in yours in a week.
Ben, have a good week, Ben.
Likewise, bud. I'll talk to you soon.